Is that on camera?
Good on Novo.
First thing to point out is that Plato, through Socrates, has been discussing the Philosopher King and the paradox thereof. And I went over that with you already. Philosopher King's a paradox, partly because philosophers are always up there in the clouds. Kings always have to address things practical. So if you're going to unite the two in a single person, this is a person who's going to, on the one hand, be concerned with beautiful things, things beyond this world, and not remember where he put his glasses. And at the same time, is going to be a guy who's eminently practical, remembers all sorts of practical things, and has to, at the same time, look towards those heavenly ideas. This is an almost impossible thing. And yet he says it's the linchpin to whether or not this city can actually exist in the world. Because the question is asked, can this city really exist in the world? And he says only when the philosopher is the king. So the paradox is that the guy who is most apt to rule is also the least desirous of it. And those who normally want to rule have no facility to actually rule. This Philosopher King paradox mirrors all those paradoxes we've seen before of the soul and the body and the heaven and the earth and all those unions between the high and the low that he's brought up over and over and over again across this dialogue. Partly to impress in us this vision of the Vesca Piscis and the divided line and the image of the golden proportion. People normally call philosophers and philosopher kings, and they call them stargazers and freighters. And they say they're useless because these guys don't know how to do practical things. They don't know how to fix a tire. They don't know how to balance a checkbook. They don't watch the latest stats from Hollywood or from the NFL. But Plato says, Socrates says, that this life, the life of the mind, the life of the soul, the philosopher life, is a life of somebody who's seen something beautiful, something tremendous, something magnificent, which most people don't tend to see. It is a vision of greatness and beauty that most people don't really ever cotton to. Well, they say, well, what is this vision of beauty you're talking about? What is this thing that you keep referring to called the good? And he says, well, I tell it to you first off, but it's a very difficult thing to comprehend. Second, I know human nature, and this is where he says the problem of trying to describe this vision to anybody rests in the fact that human beings have a certain nature. On page 190 or 183 here, he makes this kind of humorously clear, but I think very realistically clear too. He says in 503c, you know that natures that are good at learning, have memories, are shrewd and quick, and everything else that goes along with these qualities, and are as well full of youthful fire and magnificence. Such natures don't willingly grow together with understandings that choose orderly lives, which are quiet and steady. Rather, the men who possess them are carried away by their quickness, wherever chance leads, and all steadiness goes out from them. So on the one hand, you get people that are very quick, pick up ideas very fast, and yet they don't have any stick-to-itive power. They don't want to sit down and do all the figures. They don't want to go slowly through a subject. They see something quickly and they move on. And so somebody who can grasp an idea quickly is hard to teach because they don't want to go through the rigmarole of all that working out your sums and translating your texts and finding out your research. But then you have the other type. On the other hand, those steady, not easily changeable dispositions, which one would be inclined to count on as trustworthy, and which in war are hard to move in the face of fears, act the same way in the face of studies. They are hard to move and hard to teach, as if they become numb, and they're filled with sleep and yawning when they must work through anything of this sort. You get the other type of human nature who's steady and reliable and is very courageous, and yet when you try to get them to learn anything or to get a very complex idea, they're very slow. They don't get it. They plod along, and you have to drag them kicking and screaming through any kind of research or study or thought. He says this is the way humans are. We have the high and the low again, notice. And because of this, to tell anybody about this type of vision, which I'm going to tell you, is difficult because people respond negatively. He makes a couple attempts then, though, to show what this good is. The first attempt that he makes is in 505a. Glau kind of says, what is this thing that you've been talking about, this good that you refer to? And Plato in 505a says, certainly not. Just ask at all events. It's not a few times already that you've heard it, what this thing is. But now you are either not thinking or have it in mind to get hold of me again and cause me trouble. I suppose it's rather the latter, since you have many times heard that the idea of the good is the greatest study, that it's by availing oneself of it along with just things and the rest that people become useful and beneficial. So the idea of the good is the greatest study. It doesn't really answer what the good is, but it gives some idea of it. So we can start there in our discussion, well, my discussion to you, of what the good is. It is the greatest study possible. Nothing else, Plato says, is greater to study. If you look at studies or thoughts or ideas or knowledge as sort of a tiered thing, like you're progressing further, this is the end point, the good. That thing is the thing greater than which nothing can be conceived. Doesn't really answer the question too well, though. Just what is that thing? So he tries again. He gives another possibility of what this is. He says in 505e, which is further along, this, the good, is what every soul pursues, and for the sake of which it does everything. The soul divines that it is something, but is at a loss about it, and unable to get a sufficient grasp of just what it is, or to have a stable trust such as it has about the rest of things. So this is the thing which everybody pursues. Every soul pursues this. And for the sake of this, people do everything that they do. Well, that gives more insight, the thing which everyone pursues, and cause of all action, but it still doesn't answer what that thing is. We know it's the greatest possible study now. We know it's the thing which everyone pursues, but what is it? What is the thing? Give us the answer. Give us the solution. Tell us now. Like something out of Monty Python, right? Where they're all like, tell us the secret, master, right? You're all individuals. You're all special. He tries again in 508E to try and get at what this thing is. 508E, he says, this is what provides the truth to the things known and gives the power to the one who knows. It provides the truth to things known and gives the power to the one who knows. And further, it is the cause of the knowledge and the truth. It's the cause of all knowledge and truth. Without this thing, you can't know anything. Without this, you couldn't perceive what that truth is. So this thing gives knowledge, truth, the power to know to everybody. Right? What is it? It's funny because he doesn't say what this thing is. He just hints at it, like he's going around and doesn't quite fully put it into words. That leads him then to try one more time to show what the good really is. And in this, he gives another extended metaphor. Only this metaphor is on a mathematical vein. It's a mathematical metaphor for what he's trying to get at. And this is referred to as the divided line image. You hear this in philosophy, you hear this in history, and you hear this in all kinds of theology classes, the divided line of Plato. And I must admit, it's frequently misunderstood. Because most people see the divided line being is a course of study to reach the good. And it's like you have to implement it in order to have a nice school. But that's not, I think, what he's trying to do again. Like he's not really trying to find justice, or he's not really trying to make a city composed of three parts. What he's doing is he's trying to give voice to this thing, this vision, the good, in order to bring his interlocutors out of their own darkness. I keep going back to that, I know, but that's crucial to understanding what he's doing in this text. He's trying to cure a sickness, a mental sickness or a spiritual sickness, and he does so by trying to show them something more beautiful than their daily existence, something that is much more bright than anything they've ever experienced before. Here's another attempt to do that very thing, called the divided line. He says to take a line and to divide it unequally. Now, anytime you hear that in Plato, that's automatically a red flag right there. An unequal division means the indefinite dyad, without a doubt. So that he says, take a line and divide it unequally. And then divide it unequally again, and then divide it unequally again. And I've separated into parts here so we can see it in separate parts on the one hand. But notice it's A to B is to C. A prime is to B prime is to C prime, because A is now C prime. Same thing again. A double prime, B double prime to C double prime. Same thing. You could also write it this way, with a line divided, and then that divided, and then that divided. So it gets smaller and smaller each time, almost like a triangle going down, or a pit going down, or Tartarus going down. But it's hard to write notes in something like this, because it gets so small that you make your notes tiny, and people are squinting. What's on the board? I can't read that. It's in Greek. So I'm not going to write it in relationship to a divided line. I'm just showing you this is the divided line he's talking about. This is where we are putting the various things he's going to be mentioning here in the text. Here's what he mentions in the text. And honestly, when you see it laid out, mapped out like this, it is a piece of magnificence. I shouldn't have to necessarily tell you magnificence. You're old enough to recognize magnificence when you see it. But this is magnificence. This is like listening to a symphony by Beethoven. Or this is like listening to Mr. Bach's Brandenburg concertos. Or this is like listening to some incredible, dense piece of music. The Speminalium, for instance, by Calais. This is a magnificent theological, philosophical, intellectual piece. To most students, the first time it's like, it's whatever. So it's important to at least know what is he saying before we judge whether it affects us or not. He says, divide this line into these four parts. Roughly, he puts a very significant division between this first part and this part here, part A and part B, so to speak. At the very bottom of this divided line, we get lesser truth and clarity, which is nothingness. Go back for a minute to that chain of being that I brought up earlier. This is the chain of being in a different way. Nothingness is at the bottom here. Absolute being, or goodness itself, is at the top. The division here is imagination, what the Greeks called eikasia, and the second level up is trust, or pistis, great word, pistis. And these two involve number and calculation, respectively. To each is a distinct object that is the subject of contemplation. In imagination, we study images, pictures and books and movies, audible songs. These are what he calls ikones, icons. They are things that you can have an opinion about. They're changeable. Why? Because a picture can be burned, a musical score can be lost. You can alter these sorts of images very easily, just time and weathering and damage and all that. But they are a prompt for us to move to another level of thought. The next level up is things themselves, because here we have trust and calculation, and we calculate about things. We measure things. We measure, buildings and fields and trees and junk, and we weigh things and we take samples of them. So this is all where the Enlightenment kind of gets stuck in the realm of things. Plato says that these are both part of the mutable or changing world, a world that's becoming something rather than being permanently somewhere. These are becoming something else. Images, like pictures and photographs, alter over time. They fade, they're gone, they're lost. Things, trees die and grow again. Buildings crumble and are raised again. Fields are swamped and sometimes turn into lakes. So these are mutable things.